Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's virtual artist talk. Poet Marilyn Nelson in conversation with Krista Franklin discussing the Bisa Butler exhibition Portraits. My name is Maura Flood. I'm an Associate Director of Innovation and Creativity in the Department of Learning and Public Engagement here at the Art Institute of Chicago. The exhibition Bisa Butler Portraits is on view at the Art Institute through September 6, 2021, this fall. The museum is now reopened to the public, and we'll go ahead and throw a link to the exhibition page in the chat for anyone who's interested in kind of checking out that. Working exclusively in textiles, Bisa Butler makes large-scale portraits using vivid colors. Her compositions are often informed by historical photographs and present an expansive view of history through their engagement with themes such as family, community, and the promise of youth. In tonight's conversation, Marilyn Nelson will consider these themes in relation to her own work as a poet and author. This program is presented as a part of the Artists on Artists series, a public program series that highlights the creative process and creative communities. Leading artists, authors, musicians, and performers inspire new ways of understanding the museum's collection and exhibitions while making connections to their own practice. I'd like to share some brief bios just to introduce both of our artists this evening. Marilyn Nelson is the author or translator of 17 poetry books and the memoir, How I Discovered Poetry. Her many honors include 2 NEA Creative Writing Fellowships and a fellowship from the J.S. Guggenheim Memorial Foundation and the Frost Medal. She was the Poet Laureate of the State of Connecticut from 2001 to 2006. Krista Franklin, who will be leading tonight's conversation, is a Chicago-based writer and visual artist. She's a recipient of the Joan Mitchell Foundation Painters and Sculptors Grant. Her visual art has been exhibited at numerous institutions, including the Poetry Foundation and the Studio Museum in Harlem. She's been published in Poetry, Black Camera, and a number of anthologies and artist books. Our program tonight will be running until 7 p.m. Central Time. We will have a chat feature that will be active during the program, and we encourage you to jump in and introduce yourself and share your thoughts and reflections on the program. Additionally, if you'd like to drop some questions in the chat for Marilyn or Krista, in the latter part of the program, we will select a few of those questions for them to respond to. It is now my pleasure to welcome and turn the program over to Marilyn Nelson and Krista Franklin.
Thank you so much, Maura. Thank you. Thank you to the Art Institute. Thank you to Michael Green and also to Devin Davis for all you guys' work behind the scenes to make this possible. We're very grateful to be here. Welcome, Marilyn Nelson.
Thank you, Krista. And thank you to everybody involved in this much anticipated on my side evening conversation. Thanks.
For me too. Yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you, to share this virtual space with you. It's just it's a joy and truly an honor. So I know that you're going to start us off with a poem or two for this evening's event. Poetry that's in conversation specifically with the piece Safety Patrol, which is a work of art by Bisa Butler in the exhibition Portraits at the Art Institute of Chicago currently. Very excited, both of us I think are very excited about this exhibition and very excited about this work and about this artist, this illustrious artist. So please, I'm gonna turn the floor over to you to share your poetry with us that's in conversation with this beautiful work.
Thank you. Well, it's a conversation in retrospect because the poem, it has been in existence. But as I was looking at the children here, I think this photograph must be from about the 1940s, maybe 50s. And I was just thinking about what children think, how children think, what's going on in their heads. And so I picked this poem to read, which is in the voice of a boy who was about 7 years old in 1828, when his family was living in Seneca Village, which was a Black village in Manhattan that was founded in 1825. So again, this is a 7-year-old boy in 1828. It's called Under the Fathomless. Am I the only person that dreams my dreams? Does anybody else on this planet think my thoughts? Are my ideas like darting lights I've caught? Is my mind a net sieving through thought-filled streams? Frederick thinks his way through recess while the other boys play roly-hole and catch. The girls chant palm slap or jump double dutch, lost in the moment of being a child. He wonders, half listening to the rhyme, whether there is somewhere a Mary Mac and who buttons the buttons on her back. If there's eternity, then what is time? How do we know everyone is unique? Who, except God, is able to compare all of us? What if there's a boy somewhere whose self and mine are perfectly alike? What would that mean? Would it make my life less than what I know it is when I watch clouds form and dissolve, or when I am allowed to stand at night under the fathomless? So I'm just thinking that when you look at a picture of a child, a 7-year-old child, that child is probably spinning out theories of the creation of the universe. And yeah, so that's my poem for these children. And the other poem I thought might be relevant is another historical poem. The first one I read was 1828. This one would be about 1922, 1921. It's a poem about the town my mother was born and raised in. It's a town called Boley, Oklahoma. It's one of a few all-Black towns that existed in the early 20th century, that were founded in the early 20th century, or maybe even the late 19th, in Oklahoma and Kansas. And these people were homesteaders in the West, and they had an incredible sense of pride. And this poem, the children only appear at the very end of the poem. The rest of the poem describes my grandmother, who was a teacher in this town. Her name was Ray. The poem is called Armed Men. Ray teaches at the Boley Baptist School, a little too far away to travel safely there and back by buggy every day. Some years, she lets the children stay on the farm with their doting father. But this year, they're towing the line at school, although keeping them here is a bother. She has to watch them all the time. Boley's a Negro town, and sometimes carloads of white men drive through looking around. Today, for instance, as she'd held silk yard goods to her cheek and smiled at the extravagance, she'd heard the screen door creak and a young, fair-haired white man had stalked in. His dismissing eyes had registered Mr. Oliver's store, first contemptuous, then surprised. Mr. Oliver said, "Good morning, sir. One moment, please. Miss Ray, you look Easter fine this morning. Can I cut that silk today?" The white man spat a bad name. Mr. Oliver prepared to fight. The white man promised to bring some friends and shoot up the town tonight. And now Ray's children expect her to let them go out and run through the twilit streets of Bowley, where each window holds a loaded gun. So I guess I'm thinking about the safety patrol boy there who is protecting all of his peers.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much for both of those gorgeous poems.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. And you know, just the haunting nature of that last poem, I had the pleasure of reading it a little bit earlier this afternoon. And it just, I would like for you to talk to us about when you wrote these poems, right? These poems, because you said that these poems are older poems, and where can they be found, right? Because we want to also, you know, get those books and get those publications where we can find this work. But you know, what I'm also thinking too about is just the intensity of the children in that photograph, their eyes, their gazes, right? Their stance, you know, the little boy in the front, you know, the protective stance he has. And then there are also some details as well that are on their garments, you know, that are just incredible that we could talk about a little bit later. But I did really appreciate the thread through of the imminent danger, I feel like, that's in both in your poetry that you read tonight, as well as in this image that Bisa has created for us, you know, through these textiles. The imminent danger for children, you know, and our willingness and our desire to look at the curiosity, look at the wonder, you know, the promise of being young, as opposed to the dangers that, you know, many of our children face every day, you know. So I just want to say thank you for highlighting those things, because those are the gazes, I think, sometimes that we're afraid to approach and broach. And it's always good that these are places in the art and poetry that we can do that, you know? So just thank you for that so much. I think the question that I want to begin with, Marilyn, has really to do with the historical. You know, we're going to talk a lot, I think, tonight about the historical in your work, as well as the historical frameworks of Bisa Butler's works, right? So will you first answer the question about where we can find these poems before we dash off into that other section?
Sure.
Find these poems.
The first poem is in a book called My Seneca Village. And this is an experiment with the publisher. It's a print on demand book, so you won't find it in a bookstore. You have to order it. It's published by Namelos, Namelos. It was published 5 years ago. And it's based on the history of Seneca Village, which lived for about, I'm sorry, I'm really bad with numbers, 40 years, something like 40 years in Upper Manhattan. It started as an all-Black town, and then it slowly integrated during the potato famine, and when the Irish refugees were fleeing, some of them wound up joining this Black town. And then the city of New York decided it wanted a park. So Seneca Village was taken by the city by the right of eminent domain, and they were forced to leave and dispersed. And I don't think there's ever been an attempt to find maybe stories. But anyway, the book is called My Seneca village. And the other poem I read is from a book that came out earlier. It's called The Home Place. And it's the story of my mother's family history. And then it ends with some poems about the Tuskegee Airmen. My father was a Tuskegee. He was a minor Tuskegee Airman. He didn't fly in combat, but he was a part of the company. So those are those two books.
Fantastic, rich history. Thank you so much for sharing those both with us. Yeah, you know, Butler uses in her work, a lot of her early work starts off with looking at the family as a site, right? And I think that that's true. I know that you could probably agree with me that that's true even of poets, that usually our first books typically are revolving around the family site, you know, what we experienced growing up. So I love that, you know, there's this relationship between starting off telling your own personal narratives and then spiraling off from that into telling these narratives that are communal, right? That have a larger repercussions than just our own individual lives, right? So I'm really curious as to why you think that is, Marilyn. Why do you think that we as artists, we as poets, writers, go to the historical, go to the familial archive for our retellings, to do this act of retelling?
That's a good question. I don't know whether that's something traditional or if it's something recent. I'm not sure. I'm just going back through being an English major and thinking of people's writing careers. In my own case, my first book is about a lot of different things. And then my mother passed, and she was from a family that was very proud of its history, and she was committed to African American history. And when she died, my then husband said, you know, I think you should go to your grandmother's hometown and just be there for, I don't know where he got this inspired idea. But right after I came home from my mother's funeral, I bought a ticket and went to my grandmother's hometown in Kentucky and just lost myself in doing family history research. And it felt like the book I wrote felt like it was what my mother wanted me to do for years, and I just never got around to it. So it is that for me. I don't know how it works for anybody else. I love that one. Oh, I love that. I love the colors and
Anaya with oranges.
Dress. Pardon?
Textile, Anaya with oranges. The textiles, the textiles and the selection that Bisa Butler, we talked a little bit about this off screen, you know, the detail, the implicit, the incredible detail and the process that it takes for her to get to this place that we are now with this work, right? Where we're seeing this work hanging in exhibition, we're seeing this work hanging in gallery, you know, the process that it takes to get there and the incredible attention that she is paying to texture, to placement. When I look at this work, I definitely think about not just her being someone who's adept at really she's a painter. You know, when I look, she's adept at color, she's adept at texture, right? And very much thinking about her as a designer in a lot of ways.
Right.
You know, a master crafts person.
She also, just think about the light years between her work and the G's Bend quilter, for example. And the difference there, I have only seen what is possible to see of Bisa's work on a computer screen. Now I can't see it close up.
Yep.
And I saw on the little video, I saw that she's working with this huge sewing machine that she can guide, and she's sewing and quilting with a machine. And I have myself been a quilter, and her work is mind-boggling.
Truly.
But it can exist only now. It couldn't have been done earlier. It would, unless I mean, if you were, I have a couple of quilts by famous, I think she's from Mississippi, quilter named Sarah Mary Taylor.
Mm.
Quilts are all appliques on a pieced, large pieced rectangles, and then she does appliques of hands or leaves or something. But she's sewing with a needle and thread. She's holding things in her hands and putting them together that way. And this is so, I don't know what, I don't even have a word for it. It's so the future.
Mm.
It's so a technique of the future. And it's wonderful to see the fusion of the historical past and the mind and artistry and technology of the future. It's mind-blowing.
It's marvelous. I really want, I want to agree with you there for sure. It's, you know, to think about the legacy, I think is a word that I would like to kind of throw into the mix. The legacy, not just of the photographs that she has recovered and then reconstructed using an entirely different methodology, using an entirely different material, right? Using from the camera to the quilting, to the camera to the sewing machine,
Right.
You know, the camera to the hand stitch, you know,
Right.
just the deftness with which she's doing this, right? The precision with which she's doing it is really remarkable.
It truly is.
It's truly remarkable, you know, and it's noteworthy, you know.
Yeah.
Her selection.
Painting the faces, are they quilted? Are they?
Yes, everything is pieced together. Everything is pieced, yes. But there is, you know, I mean, but I will say, you know, we can go to this information from her interviews, which we can find online. Thank goodness, you know, we can go to this through the catalog, which I encourage everyone to purchase as well. Portraits that she has a background in painting. So you could tell much in the same way, I think, when I think about Romare Bearden's work. You know, Bearden was a painter. He was he was a drafts person. You can tell that Bisa's a drafts person. You know what I mean? You really can. The skill that it takes, you know, to not just render the figure, but to then take a whole other kind of material process and then incorporate that. It's absolutely magical, you know. And the faces, the expressions on the faces, the movement of the garment, you know, specifically this piece here, which I would love to talk about with you, for little girls. I was very struck by this image just because we know, right, what this photograph is referencing,
right?
Who this photograph is referencing,
right?
You know, the young women, the beautiful babies who perished, right, in the Birmingham bombing, church bombing. And this image to me is so magnificent because very often when we think about those young girls, we think about them post-life, right? We think about them after their lives. And this really renders them in their full glory and in their full girlhood, right? In the promise of who they were. And also the courage, right? Look at their little faces, you know, the joy that they had, the excitement and the anticipation about the future, right?
And the individuality.
Their stances.
Are individual girls. It's really a masterpiece.
It's a masterwork.
Oh, it is.
It's a masterwork. And the backgrounds too. I mean, I can't, the foregrounds, of course, are also incredible. But when we think about these environments that Bisa has created, these environments that Ms. Butler has created, that she's putting these figures in, right? When we think about the selections that she's making, very intentional selections about the fabrics that she's using, it makes me think too about the poem that you read, the second poem, and the figure who is in the store and holding the silk
Yes.
next to her face. You know what I mean? Just like that evokes that sensation of just that the sensual nature of the fabric, the sensual nature of the choices that Bisa is making, and the sensual nature of being in the presence of that kind of work, right? That kind of material.
Right. I spent part of the afternoon looking at family pictures here in my study and imagining changing their clothes, playing a sort of imaginary paper doll thing where I'm putting these fabrics on them. And it struck me that one of the statements here is that in some ways the clothes she puts people in speaks to their ancestry.
Absolutely.
It says I am African.
Absolutely.
But then another truth about it is that we don't have to do that. That's a gesture of pride, but it's how we're dressed. We come dressed so beautifully in our own brownness, and in some ways we're wearing the flag of, wearing the flag of Black pride and Black life matters.
Yeah.
Something that we're born with,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the history, right, that we carry.
Yeah.
I think about it a lot in terms of just in DNA. I write about it a lot, I think, in terms of just, what we carry in our DNA. I wanna pivot for a second because I think we're both so taken by the beauty of Bisa Butler's work, right? The beauty of these works. And I want to talk to you about beauty in your own work, beauty as a consideration, right? As a focus, as a consideration of the work, as a consideration of the craft. Is beauty something that you strive for in your writing practice, in the things that you produce? What role does beauty itself have in your work?
Well, I hope my work is beautiful. It's a high value for me, beauty and truth. And I don't think one is more or less important than the other. They come together as, two sides of a coin, I suppose. And so I really struggle with writing a poem. I can imagine that doing a work like the Safety Patrol, I can't even imagine it. Just imagining the details. You use the word meticulousness.
Yeah.
And the time, the concentration that has gone into this. But for me, writing poems tends to require that kind of dedication to small details. And
absolutely.
Do one, what is it, a joke about some poet who spends all day, or some, maybe not a poet, a writer though, who spent all day working, and what he's done is taken out a comma. And then the next day he spends all day working, and what he's done is put it back. And that's what it means, I think, to be to be focused on making a work beautiful. If I may just segue into something that's come into my mind.
Please.
Suddenly the work that seemed to me to require more beauty than anything else I have worked on was my Crown of Sonnets for Emmett Till.
Yes.
I knew that I could write a poem about Emmett Till and this horrible thing, and people would cry, but I wanted a stronger response because I knew that this was going to be a book for young people. It was written to be a young adult book.
Yes.
And I knew that they would be bowled over just by the history. But I wanted it to be an experience for them, like Emily Dickinson says, you know, feels the top of her head blowing off when she reads a real poem. I wanted my young readers to be blown away by the horror of the truth, but I wanted them also to have the top of their heads blown away by the beauty. I wanted two of those experiences. I wanted them to be crying and saying, oh, wow, at the same time. Yeah. And I think that Bisa's work calls up that kind of double response. Wow. And then you look at their faces. I'm looking at the boy on the left of center.
Yeah.
Who's holding a hat on his knee.
Yeah.
His eyes look so sad. His face, for me, what I see in my screen looks sad, like we're looking into him, not just at him, but into him. And again, she's capturing something that I think she found in the photograph. But she's really a wonderful artist. The boy who's sitting on the right side of the center boy, the way she has him, I feel like we're looking into him. He's very thoughtful.
Yeah.
And I don't think you see that in the picture. She's given him depth and introspection. And that makes it beautiful, I think.
Yes.
I'm just blathering here. Sorry about that.
No, I think we are not blathering. I think we are truly really thinking about these works in a very detailed fashion. You know, I think, and also the history, right? And also the way that, you know, the way that we interpret an expression. You know, when you were just talking about the expressions on their faces in Bisa's piece, I was thinking about what was on her mind as she was reconstructing these images, right? When she was looking at their expressions, what was she thinking? Was she thinking about them as being sad? Or was she thinking about them as thinking about their interiority, right? Because that's really what we're talking about, is the interior space, right? The things that we cannot see, but we can try to read from people's expressions, right? But we don't really know for certain. We can just kind of guess, right? But that interiority, the interior space, and I think that's such a good job of just expressing, you know, the Black interiority. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
This piece right here, the T. There was something that I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Something that Bisa Butler mentions in a conversation with Tanika Johnson, who is a photographer and artist here in Chicago. They had a beautiful talk that, you know, thank you audience members for being here. You can look at this talk on the website or on YouTube. But in this conversation with Tanika Johnson, Bisa Butler uses the phrase meticulous design. I keep bringing it up because I just think it's just such a powerful phrase, you know, and I'm thinking about it in terms of your writing. I'm thinking about it in terms of your use of form, how you use form right? And structure, in not in the same way, right? But in a similar way that she's using form and structure, right? She's using the idea of the quilt as a kind of form, right? And then how to superimpose her own vision inside of this form, which is very old, an old form, right? I want to also just kind of add into that mix this idea of the hidden and the embedded, the hidden and the embedded. You know, when we think about the quilts, which I'm specifically thinking about during slavery, you know,
The messages.
the messages,
Yeah.
the hidden messages, the codes, the symbols, the maps, right? All of these things that are messages that are embedded inside of the fabric, embedded in the patterning of the fabric, that I think Bisa is executing to an entirely different futuristic space. You know what I mean? Like, we can't see it, and this is the thing too, I agree with you about, we can't see it because we're looking at a computer screen. Even with books, there's nothing like the real thing, right? We have to say, those of us who are in this virtual space today and you're able to get to the Art Institute to see this exhibition safely, please do. Because, you know, it's nothing like seeing these works in person, right? It's nothing like seeing it in the flesh. And the details that we're missing, because, you know, things become flattened in books. They become flattened, right? On a screen. So, you know, I'm even thinking about what are some of the words, because I mentioned to you that there are words in some of these pieces too, right? There are phrases in some of these pieces, and the stitching and the meticulousness of that. You know, this is a perfect example here. I know why the cage bird beats his wings, which of course we know is a reference to Paul Laurence Dunbar here. This portrait of the poet himself. And the words that are embedded around the piece, the poetry around in the borders.
But one of the things that I'm sorry, finish your thought, Krista.
No, I go, please. I'm just kind of streamlining here. I'm just kind of like stream of thoughting. So please go ahead.
I was thinking about the one of the 4 women on the steps.
We can go back to that, Devin.
Thinking we recognize the decade, I think, by the style of the clothes.
Yeah.
We recognize a reference to West Africa by the fabrics that we've
absolutely.
Pardon?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and yet, oh, what was it I was going to say? Dang. I think I was going to say, and yet, the real message here is American, not African.
Could you talk about that? About that. Can you talk about that more, please?
Just, well, as I said, we recognize the era by looking at the clothes. This is what, 1890s maybe?
Yeah, 1899. Yeah. Right on it.
Yeah. So we recognize that, and then she has their shoes in the quilt also. So
yes, in the textile shirt. Yes.
Yeah. So that also gives us a sense of the date, and looking at this combination of women says something to me about photographs I've seen of HBCUs.
Yes.
Around this period. And yet the textiles speak to us as Africans, as African textiles, although they're not everywhere in Africa. You know, they're what Americans think of as African. I have not traveled widely in Africa. It's a very large continent, but
yes.
I think there are only some places where people wear these fabrics there, and that it's in West Africa, maybe Senegal, Ivory Coast. My own experiences in Africa have been in Southern Africa, in Botswana and Zimbabwe and Namibia. And they don't, if you wore a skirt like those skirts, people would stare at you because they don't wear stuff like that. And so the underlying, I don't know what I want to say about this, except that this is like a message to African Americans saying, we are here. This is who we are. I don't know, I can't make it any clearer than that.
I think that that's perfectly clear. I think what
like a banner of
amalgamation, that we are as Americans an amalgamation of many things, right? And a lot of our, now I can't make this statement for Ms. Butler because her lineage is part Ghanaian, part
yes,
she's coming from a lineage, right? A more diverse lineage than many of us, right? Like myself, for example, just your standard everyday Black girl from Ohio. You know what I mean? So I mean, I can try to trace the history. I can work on that, but in terms of having an actual direct connection with the continent, right, and with any specific country in the continent, it's going to be a little dicey. Right. So my appropriation of those of textiles, of imagery, is more of a romantic idea, a romantic notion about a place which I may have come from. Right. You know, and I have these kinds of conversations all the time. I think as artists, as poets, we have a little bit more liberty to bring in all those threads, so to speak. Right.
And we decide what's beautiful.
Yes.
We decide what our lineage is. It's nobody else's truth, but ours.
Yes.
And I said earlier that in some ways this her enterprise is to say, glory in yourself, glory in who you are. You define yourself. And for me, it's painted in our skin.
Yes.
In me, it's changing because I got vitiligo. But it's painted in our skin, and you hold a baby, and my mother used to always welcome babies as brothers or sisters.
Yeah.
You know, didn't matter whose baby it was. If it was a brown baby, it was family.
Yeah.
And I just kind of feel like that's one of the takeaways.
You know, that is what's interesting to me about that statement is something that just an image that just rushed into my head was this very obvious notion that these textiles, these quilts, right? These images are also things that could be we can enclose ourselves in. We can actually use it as something to cover ourselves, or to use it as something to warm ourselves, right? Of course we wouldn't, because it's art, it's fine art, right? But I think that the fact that this work has that, it made me think about the enveloping of the baby, the welcoming of the baby, and the welcoming of the images on this work, how you feel enveloped. You feel like you are a part of a community when you encounter this work, right? You feel like you are a part of a family, you're a part of a history, a lineage, right? A story
to the family history.
Yes.
So Alice Walker's story, Everyday Use.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
A classic.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's a perfect one to discuss, right? And it's in relationship to this work. Yeah. Alice Walker's Everyday Use. For those of you who've never read it, please find that story.
Yeah, and these are, it's about two sisters. One of whom stays at home with the family in the South, and the other one goes off to some highfalutin, mostly white college. And she comes home and she's just shocked to realize that the family is all sleeping under these antique African-American quilts that are museum quality
Priceless.
artwork. Yes. And her sister points out to her what her values have become.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
No, please. Yes. We don't have a whole lot more time. Not a whole lot more time. Let's see if I can get one more question in here for y'all. As we talk deeper about, I want to circle back actually to what you were saying about this image that we're looking at here, this photograph by Thomas Askew. And the HBCU. The HBCU, you know, I think is something that we have to talk about when we talk about Butler's work, because, you know, she went to a HBCU.
Oh, she did.
She did indeed, to Howard. And her work, you know, belies that, right? It's like you can tell that this is a person who has studied the culture, so to speak. Right? She's studied the history. She's been in the library. She's looked at the photographs. She's flipped through the books. She's read this. I mean, even her titles are often reference points to books, to poems, to songs. You know, Dear Mama, of course, she's evoking Tupac there, right? So there's, you know, there's a lot of referencing, Black historical referencing that's happening, not only in the side of the work, but also the way that the work is named, titled. Yeah, and that HBCU thing I think is very critical to point out here in the case of this particular artist, because definitely that culture piece is deep in the work, and that historical referencing about the quilt, about the history of the quilt as it pertains to Black people in America and abroad. You know, the history of the textile, the history of the way that one tailors something too. I think about her work. I think when I look at her work too, I also think about that she's a tailor. You know, she's a tailor, she's a seamstress, right? There's a lot of, you know, there's a lot that's happening here. Embroider, right? An embroiderer. Right. So many different kinds of styles that she's using. But I think the critical piece here, again, is that historical backing that she has, the eye towards the past and pulling the past into the present, and thereby pulling us into a new future space. You know,
and also she's created a new medium which grows out of a traditional medium. I mean, African American quilts are generally much more spontaneous. What's the word I want? It's a word for jazz.
Improvisational.
Yes. Yeah. They tend to be improvisational, and I'm sure there is a lot of improvisation as she's working, but her quilts seem to be designed.
Yes.
But every one of them leads you to ask some questions about history, about our history, American history and African American history. This one, you know, there's a history in these two people, probably mother and daughter.
Yeah.
Look at their faces, something has happened.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I kind of feel like Dear Mama means that maybe the grandmother is sick, or my reading into it, maybe somebody, like the two of them are in Michigan, but the family place is someplace in the South, and the mama has something to be worried about. But how are we going to pay for tickets? How are we going to get down there? How, what can we do from this? The pain in their faces seems to ask you to find the stories behind the quilt, to find the stories that are implied here. I feel that they're very, in some ways, they're very literary, because they're all histories, yes, but they're also stories.
Oh, they're definitely very much narratives, without question.
Yeah.
Without question.
Yes.
And I love that they are, as you just eloquently described, they are narratives that we can insinuate ourselves in, or put ourselves in, and imagine further the possibilities of the story, right?
It's what art does, right?
Yes.
Art is supposed to expand us.
Right.
And what she offers is a context that we can project ourselves into, and have our hearts and minds expanded. And there is no door saying you're not welcome into art.
Right.
Art, if you're willing to take the risk of heartbreak,
yes,
art is there.
Yes.
Waiting.
Yes. Now, this is another piece. I'm just going to say very quickly before we segue into our Q&A. Are you willing to take a couple of questions, Marilyn?
Sure.
Okay.
Not that I have anything to say, but
you have plenty to say. I want to say though, this is one of those pieces that has the writing in the background. I don't know if you can see it on your screen.
I can't read it.
There's writing. I can't always make out the writing, but there is writing embedded.
Dear Mama, I appreciate. Got it. Okay. Oh, so it's a letter. Yeah.
You see it?
Yes.
I'm going through our chat. First of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's in this chat room. It's such a weird space, these Zoom virtual gatherings. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's come. If we didn't get to your question, I want to say I'm very sorry about that. I know that we rambled and prattled. It's a Friday night. We're doing the best that we can. All right, so we're gonna try to at least get a couple of questions. I see that I'm going through our chat. Just give me a moment. Thank you all for your patience again. Okay, let's I'm gonna put this one out. Can we talk about the relationship between collage, which I talked about a bit in my work? I do very focused on collage, and Butler's use of patchwork, a collage with fabric. I'm not sure if I would call it patchwork for sure, but I definitely hear what you're saying with that, and how the piecework or fragments of imagery might be used in your poetry, Marilyn. Fragments of imagery and piecework in your poetry. The idea of pieces making a whole, and how that informs the art of all of the artists. You, Bisa, and I'm gonna put myself in there, but let's not tonight. Yes. Can you talk a little bit about that though? The piecework of poetry, of the craft of poetry, and specifically the poetry that you write.
Yeah, because the mind is a poem from, I read it first when I was a freshman in college, in an English class, a poem by Ezra Pound. The first line is, "Your mind and you are our Sargasso Sea."
Mm.
And it describes a mind just full of flotsam, floating in and out on the waves. And that's true about the mind. And that's what the mind is. It's like a monkey juggling for you all the time. You try to meditate, you become very conscious of the fact that your mind is just always throwing up stuff to entertain you. And writing poems means, in a way, somehow controlling the juggling act that the mind is doing and shaping the little pieces and fitting them together, which is what you do, at least in piecework quilting,
Yes.
putting these things together. And my quilts are all improvised between the sewing machine and the cutting board. So I would sew maybe 4 strips of fabric together and then cut in different ways to see what kind of shapes I could make out of them. And yeah, that's the way, in some ways, I think it's how creativity works. You work with what you're given. You have these materials and you look at them and figure out, what can you make that might bring beauty into the world? What can you make out of, I don't know, 6 toothpicks and some dryer fluff? You'll be surprised at what can be made out of the unlikeliest things. So,
Absolutely. Completely agree. I think that's a beautiful answer. Thank you so much for that. Very generous answer. I'm gonna hit one more question and then I think we have to wrap up. I think we're over time. I just want to say again, thank you to everyone for coming tonight. I want to say thank you to you, Marilyn. And thank you just to the Art Institute and to Bisa Butler for these extraordinary works. Right? These extraordinary works. I mean, we're really lucky. We're very, very lucky to live in the same time period as this young woman making this work. I feel very honored, you know. There was a question that came out. I'm gonna just quickly respond to this question. It was a question about rap's relationship to poetry, which seems to come up often, you know, people like to hash this out. I like to say that rap is the cousin of poetry. They are cousins. There's some kinship there between them without question. You know, some people are poets who are rappers and some people are not. It's really simple to me. I think that if you know, this is the opportunity to study, right? As we go deeper into Bisa Butler's work, deeper into Marilyn Nelson's work, deeper into just the study and the practice of these crafts, right? We can begin to kind of make these connections, you know. But I think, you know, rap is rap, poetry is poetry. They can exist in their own realms and they can sometimes mix and mingle and they're sometimes friends and it's okay. But we don't have to necessarily have everything be the same thing. I use rap a lot. You know, I'm a poet who leans heavily on rap because of the era that I grew up in. So I'm very influenced, you know, in my own practice by rap music, in my poetry. But I don't think that all rap is poetry. No.
I don't have much of an opinion about this because I'm too old to have an opinion about it. But I don't know that I would make a strict dividing line. There is cross-pollination, and we think of poetry as something that's really good. late father-in-law liked a gravy I made for pork chops. And whenever I made it, he said, poetry. But I'm sure that the poetry that people are writing 50 years from now will have a lot of influence of rap.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. And many other kind of musical forms, I think, right?
Yeah.
And art, visual art as well. You know, I don't think we can exclude those, you know, influences either, you know, on the writer, you know, of the future.
Yeah.
Right. We have been asked to wrap this, but there's been a special request, Marilyn, for another poem. Can you end us up with a shorter poem? Do you have one nearby? If not, we can always reference people because Marilyn Nelson is a very well-known poet. You can find many readings, I'm sure, online as well.
Yes, you can find them online.
So many readings, right? Beautiful legacy of poetry here with this woman. So, you know, if you have something brief for us to close us out, Marilyn, we would love it.
I have a very small poem in the voice of George Washington Carver.
Beautiful.
It's called The Dimensions of the Milky Way. The dimensions of the Milky Way were discovered by an astronomer named Harlow Shapley in 1918. And this poem catches Dr. Carver at that point reading a newspaper about it. And he spent most of his adult life living in the men's dorm at Tuskegee Institute. So that's where he is. The dimensions of the Milky Way. Behind the men's dorm at dusk on a late May evening, Carver lowers the paper and watches the light change. He tries to see Earth across a distance of 25,000 light years from the center of the Milky Way. A grain of pollen, a spore of galactic dust. He looks around, that shagbark, those swallows, the fireflies, that blasted mosquito, this beautiful world. 100 billion stars in a roughly spherical, flattened disk with a radius of 100 light years. Imagine that. He catches a falling star. Well, Lord, this infinitesimal speck could fill the universe with praise.
I just want that to be the last word. Boom, we are done.
Thank you to everyone. Thanks, Krista. Thanks for everyone who did this, and to everybody who came out or stayed in. I guess you didn't go out. Yeah, thank you anyway.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much, Marilyn, for being here with us. And thank you so much to the Artists Institute of Chicago and Bisa Butler. Please go see this exhibition.
All right, and that concludes our program. Thank you so much, Marilyn and Krista, for your time and your generous thinking and just this really rich conversation. That was a beautiful way to end. And thank you to all who participated and joined us tonight. You can see Bisa Butler exhibition portraits on view through September 6th. We are reopened, so come and see it. But meanwhile, we have a lot of virtual programs happening all the time. I'll go ahead and link that in the chat. You can check those out. And also we're continually trying to make resources and make digital content available to kind of share the collection and our exhibitions with you all as much as possible. So check out the website. And that kind of brings us to a close. Thank you, everyone, and take care.